Computer. Great, awesome. Hey everyone, welcome to the meetup. I'm just going to give a little introduction to the group before I turn it over to Mark. My name is Renee, and I co-organize the WordPress Pittsburgh meetup. We didn't have too many meetups last year. We try to do one once a month. So this is actually a two-parter. So you found this one, which is great. So hopefully you will come back for the next one. It's just in a couple of weeks. We will have recordings of this meetup and that meetup as well. I posted in the chat and I just posted it again. The slides are already up. So if you go to that link, you'll be able to get all the slides. Mark has several sets of slides and resources for you. And the video will be there either later tonight or tomorrow. So if you are interested in speaking, we're always looking for speakers on various topics. So from beginner to intermediate to advanced, anything in between, anything really related to WordPress, so things like email marketing, social media, content, really anything. We love new speakers, or we just love to hear what you want to hear about. So if there's something that you are interested in learning about, let me know or let one of us know and we can try to find a speaker on that topic. So I guess that's my spiel. Feel free to put questions and stuff in the chat, and I'll let Mark tell you how he wants to handle those, if he wants to take them during or at the end or whatever. So, and if you have questions, just let me know. So I'll turn it over to you, Mark.
Cool. Renee, you're recording, right?
Yeah, I am. Yep, recording. We did it. Woo.
Okay, sweet. Let me get myself oriented. So I should just click share screen, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. So are we good? Are people seeing?
No, almost. It's coming. Yep, there we go.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now I've got my people over here. Where do I end up seeing the chat?
I don't know if you click on it, if it'll come up in its own window. Otherwise, I think it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't show.
Let me see here. More chat. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I'm opening up here. I've got all my screens and all that goodness. Awesome. I'm glad I have like two 24-inch monitors here. Okay.
Hopefully you zoom for us. Okay, good. Because that one screen I was like,
yeah.
Little.
All right. Are we all good then?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Sweet. So thanks, Renee, so much for the introduction and for the opportunity. Honestly, everybody, I don't know when that meetup was, Renee, like a month or a month and a half ago.
In November, I think.
Okay. In the first 10 minutes, I was like, I could do a presentation on Divi. Nice. And I reached out to Renee during the chat and she was like, yeah, let's talk. And we started emailing and here we are. So the process has been really easy. She's been organizing it and helping me along the way with some feedback. So if you have anything that you feel anybody could benefit from, consider jumping in and starting a class. It's really fun putting it together and hopefully we're going to have a lot of fun tonight. So welcome to our online meetup, or I should say our online class, because obviously it's 2021 and all the cool kids are doing class online at this point. So consider yourself part of the cool crowd today, because you could be sitting on the couch watching Netflix, but you're here tonight investing in yourself, your education, possibly your business. And I think that's pretty cool. So I hope you just have a great time talking about Divi and sharing some ideas about WordPress workflow. Also, shout out, I happen to see that there's a guy on this stream named Dirk who I actually worked with at a church I'm going to mention later. So hi, Dirk, crazy to see you here. So just a quick overview of what we're going to be doing tonight, letting you know where we're going and how we're going to get there. What I want you to do tonight is walk away with some new ideas, thoughts, and some actions that you could possibly take to either start a workflow or improve your current workflow as you work with Divi. And so that as you work with it efficiently, confidently, and consistently. That's a key part of tonight, working with Divi consistently. In order to get there, I broke the presentation down into 4 parts. First, you're going to hear a little bit about me and my journey with Divi. Then we're going to talk about the importance of workflow in general. Then third, what most of you probably came for is my exact workflow that I follow when I'm making Divi websites for clients. And finally, everybody's favorite, the Q&A session where you can ask me about my workflow or ask me about my business with Divi and share your ideas as well. There's a lot to cover tonight, so that's probably when we'll look at questions in the chat and just have a great conversation when we get there. So don't feel overwhelmed by all the information that comes today. If you can just walk away with one thing that you can take an action on, I think that is pretty awesome. So without further ado, let's get into section 1, a little bit about me and my Divi journey. Some fast facts. My name is Mark Cunzolo. I'm from Beaver, Pennsylvania. I'm 35 years old, and I co-own a digital marketing and media company called Peculiar Pxl. And we work with everybody from children's authors to musicians, all the way up to, we just picked up an online pharmacy that specializes in making pre-packaged and pre-sorted pill packs that they ship to their customers. So we're kind of all over in our industries that we work with. When I'm not working with Peculiar Pxl, I'm also running another business with my wife called Cyro and Ivy. She is a resin artist, but together we also make custom serving boards and coasters. So literally, as soon as we're done with the meetup tonight, I'm going out to our wood workshop and I'll be working on serving boards all the rest of the night. And when I'm not doing either of those two things, you'll probably find me watching Avatar: The Last Airbender and eating some chips and hummus. So if you like web design, woodworking, and enjoying some snacks, then we can hang out sometime, okay? So thanks again so much for being here with me and letting me share tonight. Now, my Divi journey, my WordPress journey was an interesting one. It's not one that I saw coming. Back in high school, the only thing that I really was interested in was crime scene investigation, especially CSI Las Vegas, if anybody remembers that show. And when my mom found out that Duquesne University was coming out with a forensic science program, I knew that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I went to Duquesne, got my bachelor's in biology, and I started to get my master's in forensic science. But in my final year, I kind of had a change of heart and switch my majors over to education. I got my master's in secondary education and went on to teach 7 years of 7th and 8th grade science. And again, I thought that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. But God had different plans. And around year 6, I had another change of heart and wanted a new challenge and a career that gave me more flexibility. And that's when I picked up, of all things, a HTML and CSS for Dummies book. Okay, that's how I started teaching myself, just with this book. And then I went on to teach myself JavaScript as well. And within a year of doing that, the church that I'd been going to since I was 15 opened up a web developer position. But the hitch was, even though I knew HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, they were looking for somebody with WordPress experience. Now, I had no WordPress experience, I had no PHP experience, and so I was really coming into it blind, but I was determined and I was a good learner, so they hired me into the position. And as soon as I got in, I was like, how am I going to start to work with WordPress? And that's when I discovered the world of page builders. And after doing all my research, ultimately Divi was the page builder I decided to go with. And even though I thought it would only be like a tool I used for my first year, it ended up being the tool that I relied on my entire time working there, and built a number of sites for the church that were very successful, even with their larger congregation. So during that time, I started to realize, I could launch my own Divi-based website, or Divi-based business, I should say. And that's what a friend and I did. We ended up moving on from the church and starting Peculiar Pxl just over a year ago. And within that year, we've picked up 11 clients. And in 2021, we're already starting to onboard some additional projects. So I go through all of that because I know we're talking about workflow tonight, but I wanted to just encourage anybody who's on the call tonight. If you're trying to transition from one career into a web design career, or you're currently building up your business or trying to figure out how to use Divi in order to build up your business, be encouraged. Look at my journey. I had no idea I was going to be here, but because of WordPress and Divi and a never say die attitude, I'm working for myself, having more freedom, and working on the projects that I want to work with. So if I can do it, you can definitely do it. Be encouraged and stick with it. Now, I do want to point out that aside from Divi and WordPress, the other thing I needed was a never say die attitude. And that's because my journey with Divi wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, okay? Literally within my first week of working with Divi, I wanted to stop working with Divi. It had bugs, it was missing key features that I thought it should have, and it was just so different from anything I had ever worked with before. And it didn't help that when I got into the position, I was tasked with rebuilding all of the church's websites and trying to figure out how to integrate it with its church management software. And I had to start a podcast for the lead pastor, something else I had never done. So it really was sink or swim time at the church and with using this tool. So I knew I needed to figure it out and figure it out quickly. And so, like many of you, I jumped into the Divi resource community. I was watching every video, consuming every article I could find. Anytime Elegant Themes came out with a layout, I was reverse engineering it so I could learn how they built it. And as Divi podcasts were starting to be released, I was listening to all of those episodes. But even though I was consuming all of those resources, I still found myself being frustrated every time I was working with Divi. And I couldn't quite put my finger on why until I started paying attention to the larger picture. Yes, I could find an article that taught me how to change my header logo when I scrolled, but I couldn't find any articles where pros were teaching me, here's how I start a project with Divi and take it all the way through to the end. And so what that resulted in was I had no process. I had no way of prototyping, starting, or managing my Divi websites. So when my team leader came to me and said we needed a site, I just jumped in, built it, launched it, and dealt with the fallout later on, which led to long build times, inconsistency, and again, frustration when I later had to update and change the site. So I knew that I didn't need more articles telling me how to build individual elements. I needed something telling me how to build a Divi workflow. So again, I share all of that to encourage you, number one, but to number two, show you, kind of the dark side of not having a workflow when you're using a tool that's as complex as WordPress as well as Divi. So now let's step into segment two and we'll talk about the importance of workflow. I keep throwing that word around. If you're anything like I was just a few years ago, workflow was just like a fancy word that other developers used when you were at a conference. But now I realize that workflow is very simple. This is really all it is. It's a structured process you follow in order to complete a project or even a portion of a project. Even shorter, and this is really the way I like to think of workflow, it's a predetermined, optimized path towards success. If you just jump right into a web design project without following any type of predetermined path, it's like making your way across a room that's pitch black and there's no lights on. You can crawl around and feel around and stumble in the dark, and maybe eventually you'll reach the door and you'll get out into the hallway where the success is. But it's much easier if you turn on the light and you can see where you're going and plan your steps out ahead of time. You'll get to the door faster, safely, and more enjoyably along the way. So that's how I like to think of workflow. Now, a phrase I want to point out within the larger definition is this: structured process. That is really the key element to your workflow, is that it's a structured process. And that means that your workflow needs to have these three things: predictable, repeatable, and connected steps. If you don't have predictable, repeatable, and connected steps, then you don't really have a workflow. You just have a task list of unrelated items that you're checking off as you go. So if you have a workflow, that means A comes before B. You have to do B before you can do C. Once you've done C, that gives you what you need in order to do D, so on and so forth. And all of those tasks are linked and help you build and create something bigger than the sum of the tasks. A good analogy would be like preparing for a vacation. There's certain things you have to do in a certain way. First you have to think of where you want to go. Then you have to then you have to book your dates and your room. Then you book your flight and then you pack. If you do those out of order, it's really going to mess up your entire vacation. So there is an exact order that you're following. So continuing with that analogy, You know, stepping into a web design project without a workflow, it's like going on vacation without preparing. Come the day of, if you haven't, you know, printed your boarding passes ahead of time and you didn't book a taxi and you forgot to pack your beach clothes, with enough luck, you might get where you're going, but the whole journey has been so frustrating that it can kind of taint the whole vacation. And I don't want that for you. I want you to enjoy the whole web design process, not just, hey, I ended up with a web design in the end at least. So once you start working with a workflow, and one that especially that works for you and your style, here are 9, because I'm a giver, benefits that you're going to experience by utilizing a workflow. I'm going to list them here, and then I'm actually going to read some, like a quick sentence that I wrote for each one, because I like the way that I stated it and I want to make sure it all comes across clearly. So when you establish your workflow and you start utilizing that in line with Divi, first big benefit you're going to experience is clear expectations, especially if you're working with a client. With a workflow, I already know what information I need from my client and when I need to know it by. That gets all of the details laid out and agreed to and makes it easier to prevent scope creep. If you're working with your employer or a client, scope creep can just make a project unbearable and it just starts to get out of control quickly. Second benefit, increased confidence throughout the project. I always say that the key to success with any large project is only knowing the next step that you need to take. With a workflow, you eliminate the decision-making ahead of time and you're able to only focus on the next step. So it all just feels more manageable. Number 3, reliable timelines. After testing your workflow on enough projects, you'll get a feel for how long each step typically takes you. This comes in handy when presenting expectations to your clients. Number 4, happier, more informed clients. Who doesn't want that, right? Because I have a workflow, I'm able to constantly update clients on what I've accomplished and what I'm going to do next. Web design clients enjoy hearing updates and knowing that their project is in a constant state of forward motion. Number 5, your workflow is going to improve your team communication. If you work with a team and you use a project management tool, for instance, my business uses Asana, your workflow can actually be visually represented, allowing your team members to know what stage the project is in, where they can help out, and who's done what so far in the life of the project. Number 6, you'll have better revisions and approvals. A good workflow reminds you to regularly review the site's progress with your client, which keeps you from going down the wrong path early and performing a lot of unnecessary work. 7, improved quality overall. A workflow is going to help you decrease the project's amount of overlooked tasks, iterate and improve along the way, and build consistency into your entire process. Number 8, you're going to get a lot of repeatable and reusable tools. As you go through your workflow over and over again, you're going to start to develop email, survey, approval, feedback, and layout templates that you can use with multiple clients and multiple projects. And finally, a workflow is going to help you create faster iteration of even other business processes. And here's how I like to think of it. When you're looking at buying a car and you're thinking of buying, let's say, a green car, all of a sudden, all you see on the road are green cars. They were there the whole time, you just weren't really looking for them. What I found is that when you're constantly utilizing and working on improving your workflow, you'll start to see other areas of your business that you can create workflows for and start to templatize, which just makes you more efficient all around. So you can see that the benefits of a workflow is very vast, and I'm sure there's other things that you guys could list here, but that's my kind of like condensed list and my reasoning for why you need to get started on this now if you haven't already. Now, if this isn't convincing you, one of the arguments rolling around in your head might be that, hey, Mark, every project is different, so I'm nervous that a workflow would kind of box me in. But to that, I'd say 2 things. Number 1, even though every project is different, really every web project breaks down to the same parts: research, planning, designing, developing, testing, and launching. That's really it. Like, each of those sections can obviously have different steps in between, but that's pretty much every web design project in a nutshell. So if that's the case, why not at least create a general workflow that you can add to or take away from as the project needs? And the second thing I would say is that a workflow doesn't actually box you in. If anything, I feel like it allows you to be more flexible, because since you are prepared, you're able to make more informed decisions when challenges and the unforeseen arises, which means you start responding rather than reacting to the challenges. If you're already stressed out at the beginning of the project, just trying to remember how to even start it, how do you think you're going to respond when the unexpected happens? A workflow helps you to get grounded and feel secure. All right, so we've talked about my background with Divi. We've talked about the importance of a workflow. And now let's get into segment 3, the meat of the whole shebang tonight. And that's talking about Divi and my workflow that I'm following. I hope you like my little graphic that I made here, because we're going to show you the way tonight. And again, I'm not going to tell you every single little step that I do along the way, because that would take forever. Plus, I want to give you something that's, you know, more top level, so then you can take it and start to see, how do I apply this in my own business and in my own workflow? So the first step that I do with every single project, it's not the sexiest, but to me, it's ultimately the most important. And that is starting off with a client questionnaire. I don't know what it is, but my brain has the ability to just take in tons and tons and tons of information. And then all of a sudden it sees the path that I need to take. So at the beginning of a project, it's all about taking in as much information as I possibly can from either the client or from myself, so that I can just keep assessing that information, not pushing any thoughts, but just taking it in until my mind finally clicks and sees the path that I need to start following. So with a client questionnaire, my key purpose is a little different than you might expect. Let's pay attention to the purpose here. With a client questionnaire, it's really helping me structure a website around the goals of my client and their target audience. Notice that I'm not saying that the purpose of a client questionnaire is to find out what content goes on the site or what features go on the site. It's really to keep everything structured around the goals of the client and their target audience. You can have all the design elements that you want and all of the functionality and all the content that you can think of on the site, but if it's missing the mark of helping the people using the site achieve their goals, then none of it really means anything. So it's all about bringing it back to the main goals of the site. When you start going off on a tangent and not focusing on the goals, that's when you can end up with project failure at the very end, even though you've made the site and it looks great. The other thing that I like about this is it gives you an opportunity to enlighten and educate your clients. Honestly, I can't tell you how many times that I've gone through a questionnaire with a client and they've been duped. Not duped, they've been like stumped. They sometimes don't know what their goals are. They don't know what they want from their website. They don't know who their target audience is. They don't know what their target audience is trying to do. And they realize, hey, I actually need to go and think about these things before we step into the project. And that might slow things down on our end, but it's going to pay off ultimately. So then they go back, they think about that, and they end up feeling a lot more excited about their business and confident once they know these things. And then the thing that I like the most there, you can see my last point, it helps you sell your ideas more easily. Later on, let's say you want to come to a client and you want to suggest to them, hey, I don't think that you need to include this on your website. Rather than you just sounding to them like he just doesn't want to do extra work or she just doesn't want to include that, you can say, hey, I don't think we should include this on the website because it's going against this goal. Or on the flip side, I think we need to make sure we include a blog because that's going to help us achieve this goal. When you can come across to your clients as somebody who's really helping them achieve their goals, and you can provide a solid why around the goals that they've agreed to, that makes it a lot harder for them to argue against your ideas as the designer. So here's a look at the actual questions that I utilize. There's a second slide to this. And as Renee said at the beginning, all of this is going to be posted online, so don't feel like you have to write all of this down. But I've starred some of my key questions. First off, who are the ideal users or groups of users that visit your website? And what does each group of user want to accomplish or get from your website? I want my clients to name those users, describe those users, and list every goal that they would have from their website, because that's really the core piece of what I start designing and making decisions from. And then that other question I have starred towards the bottom of the page, pay attention to the wording here. What essential content must be kept, and here's the key part, in order to help everyone achieve or reach their goals? I didn't just start with what content must be kept in, or even what essential content must be kept in, because it's really hard for clients to say no to content. They'll end up thinking everything has to be included. But if we keep it focused on the goals, it helps them start to realize, this content really isn't needed to achieve this. This is the most important thing that helps somebody achieve the goal. And that really helps them start kind of slimming things down and making the message more clear. My questions continue, as you can see here, asking about pages that are required. Like, let's say that we did a physical therapy client and they had to have a page with a HIPAA policy on it. So that was nice to know from them because they're specializing in their industry. But you can see here, I continue focusing on the goals. What additional functionality and features would be a bonus, though not essential? So again, that helps them draw lines. And then I really like this question. Tell me 3 websites within your market that are doing it well and list why. I want to know what they like about the look, the content, the functionality. And Renee and I were just talking about this at the beginning. It's okay to steal ideas, guys. Or if you want to say borrow, if the word steal is a little too harsh for you, okay? Take ideas from these websites. Your client has already told you, I like this website and what they're doing. And if you can start to borrow things and then tweak it and make it slightly unique for them where it really matters, then they're already going to be interested in the ideas that you're pitching. So I want to show you, as I go through this presentation, results that I'm getting for an actual client that we're working with called Families Matter Food Pantry. So what you're going to see here is some information that I collected from them using this client questionnaire. So Families Matter Food Pantry is currently undergoing a rebranding, and we're building a new website for them. So I had them go through this questionnaire, and if you really start looking through this, you'll see that I'm getting a lot of high quality information right up front. I was able to work with them to identify 3 groups of site users: customers, volunteers, and donators. Focusing on customers, these are individuals and families who need relief from food insecurity. They come to the pantry website in order to find the pickup location, find the distribution times, determine eligibility, and how to get started and what to do when they arrive. So that told me right away, if I want to achieve success, I have to make sure the site allows this group of visitors to accomplish all of those goals. Again, that's a lot different than saying, what content do we need? It's first figuring out the goals and then figuring out the right content to achieve those goals. You can see I did the same thing for the client. They had 4 goals: build brand awareness, make it easy for customers to know how to get food, for donators to know how to donate, and for volunteers to know how to volunteer. So then you can see how I went back and I was like, okay, so we need eligibility requirements. We need clear contact info. We need a pickup schedule. I just started thinking of all the content, features, and functionality that could be utilized to help them achieve their goals. Continuing on with that, I then went through and made a list. Hey, here's the possible features and functionality we're going to need to achieve these goals. After talking with them, I realized that they didn't want to include their blog or their news page or a biography about the finder because they had had some type of issue occur or whatever. I'm just kind of making that up, but like, you could have that with a client and you wouldn't know unless you're taking the time to find this out from them. And then they give me some great website examples that I was able to pull a ton of ideas from, both good and poor. So again, this questionnaire is essential at the beginning. It really sets the stage for everything else to come, because remember, a workflow is connected steps. So you're going to see here, step 2, creating a sitemap. builds off of the information collected from the questionnaire. Now, this is not the wireframe. This is the sitemap, which is really just kind of like a spider, frame of the pages on the site to help the client start to visualize things. So I take the questionnaire results and I use that to build an official sitemap that eventually I have the client approve. So this sitemap shows the relationship between pages and gives them a clear picture of the site's content, organization, and navigation. This is where your clients will start to finally visualize the site from a very top end. Up to this point, you've just been sharing ideas. Now they're starting to actually see, oh, this is how the pages will be structured. This is how they're going to relate to one another. And I put our goals, I put our functionality and features right on there and have them approve it so that this is our official scope for this project. If everything on here gets done, then the project is a success and this is what you've agreed to. And that's why I utilize the sitemap as an ongoing build reference. While I'm putting things together, I'm going over to the sitemap and I'm checking things off. Did I achieve this goal? Did I include this content? Is this page on there? And I know when I'm done. So continuing on with Families Matter Food Pantry, here's page 1 of the sitemap that I built for them. Their site is relatively simple because they're just starting off with a smaller project and then we're building on from there. But you can see that I visually show them, hey, here's the main pages that you're going to have. And then I even show them the utility pages. Utility pages for me are things like legal pages, success pages, and your 404 page. And so if I had other pages nested under Donate Now, then I would show them with lines coming off from here and they would see how those funnels would start to be built if it was a more complex site. So we have the visualization of the site structure, i.e. the sitemap, and then here's where I list all of the agreed upon site goals for everybody and the agreed upon feature set. Then if the client needs some further idea about like the find food page, what is that? I'll give them kind of a rough overview of the content that I'm thinking is going to be on this page, if the page requires it. So you can see I'm just kind of giving them a flow. Hey, on the find food page, we're going to have a COVID alert, distribution info, eligibility requirements, so on and so forth. And that's what the client can expect to see on that page. Now, a couple pro tips for you on this one. Revise it as you need to with the client. This is an official document for our business where we go back and forth with 2 or 3 rounds of revision with our client. And then once they fully accept it, this is the scope finally of the project. And then, as I said before, check things off as you build. I keep going back and I just knock all of these items off so that I know I've done everything I said I was going to do and that they agreed to. Okay, so that's step 2, building your sitemap using your client questionnaire information. Now we get to step 3, building a repeating wireframe. This is where the visualization of the site steps up a whole nother notch. And this can be kind of I don't want to say a debated issue within the Divi community, but this is where I've heard a lot of variation and I hear a lot of people skipping building the wireframe and just jumping right into Divi and designing. So maybe that's the new school and I'm old school, but I prefer wireframing in XD or some other program before jumping into Divi, and I'll talk about why in a second. But with the wireframe, the overall goal for me is to build something that's consistent, user-friendly, and keeps the goals of the site in focus. And I think that's why I don't like jumping right into Divi and building. I feel like if you jump right into Divi and just start building the site in there, thinking that you're going to save time ultimately, you lose sight of the goals and you start being design focused. And instead of looking at the whole page or the whole site, you're focused on just this 766 pixel tall little section of your screen. And that's all you're building for without full context of everything around it. So I like building in an external program to keep the focus on the site and user goals to create consistency between my pages as well. Also with XD, what's nice or any programs like that is that they usually include a way for your client to see your wireframes and give feedback. And that's what we do. When we're done with the wireframes, we share them with them in a way like they're looking at a live website, and they can go through and put pins and all sorts of comments. We go through and we look over all of the wording, every last word, every last spelling together. And so in the end, we know they have approved every square inch of this site, which is going to save us time and frustration later. Again, we have an organized location for feedback, and you really get focused before you go into Divi. It eliminates all of the guesswork. Once you're going into Divi now, it's just putting a cherry on top of the cake. All of the design work, all of the writing, all of the planning has been done. Now you're just going into Divi to execute. Okay, so my pro tips with this would be use a lot of repeating structures. Carry elements from your homepage into the rest of your site. Build sections that you can use multiple times. Build entire page layouts that you can use multiple times. That's ultimately going to save you and create consistency for the site visitors. So I'm going to go into XD and actually show you the whole wireframe now that I built for Families Matter. What I'm just showing you here are all of the repeating elements that I identified in my wireframe and used in multiple places. So I'm going to slide over here. Is everybody able to see my XD screen? Okay, I'm going to zoom in here at certain parts, but what I just want to show you here is the large scale scope of what I'm able to create in XD. I'm able to zoom out and get the most top level picture of this person's website as I can. I can also zoom in and focus on a single page from top to bottom. And I can get a feel for how does this entire page flow? How is this section tied together with this section from beginning to end? If you're jumping right into Divi, it's like you're working like this, okay? And now this is all you're focused on. And then you go to the next section and you work on this. And then you go to the next section and you work on this. And you can start to realize that you have a hodgepodge of a site where within the page, there's just a ton of different fields, which actually makes it hard for users to interact with, which means conversions suffer. The other thing that I started with early in my career and notice a lot of people do as well is they think they have to make a new design every single page. Not only does that slow you down, but again, that injures the consistency between the site. So don't think that you have to come up with a groundbreaking design from page to page. I'll admit, Elegant Themes with their layout packs, every page is like a designer's dream where everything is unique and there's movements all over the place. In the real world, that takes forever, but it also doesn't translate great sometimes for user experience. So don't be afraid to create that consistency. So, we talk about workflow. I even have a XD starter project that I maintain and constantly update. So every time I start a new wireframe for a client, I load up that starter project and I have a bunch of stuff already made for me. Then I go in and I set my topography up because you can save components and I can utilize these around the wireframe. Then I go in and I build my header and footer, which I create as components so I can use them in other places and only have to change them in one location. And then what we do in our business is we create the homepage in its entirety. So I will do the layout, trying to show you the whole thing. I'll do the layout and then share it with my designer. Once he is kind of like, yeah, I get where you're going with this, I think it's good, I'll go back and literally write all of the wording for it. Then I'll hand it back to him and he'll go through and do this initial design. Then we'll meet with the client and have them go through this design of this homepage. They'll go through the wording, we'll make revisions to the design. And once they're okay with the homepage, if they don't feel that they need to see a subpage, that's really the only page in the wireframe that we take to completion. The rest of them you can see are just shades of blue and boxes that represent images, but I will then go through and write out all of the wording for the website. So I'm also a writer, so that's a benefit to being a web designer, but also a writer, is I'll go through and do all of the wording and go through it all with my client and edit with them. So in the end, what I have here is everything absolutely designed for me. All of the wording is done. And now I'm heading into Divi just fully confident, knowing I just have to recreate this. Now, I also talked to you about repeatability and carrying elements through from your homepage. You can see here, here's the COVID-19 bar. And then what do you know? There it is on all of these pages. Then you can see here, I put this text on the left, picture on the right, and then the reverse of that. Well, here it is on all of these pages. I'm just reutilizing elements. Then we have this call to action section down here with a headline and these buttons. Then I have a call to action section at the bottom of every one of these pages that is very similar. It's just center aligned. Then even between these pages, you can see here, this extremely right aligned section of text shows up here and here and here. It's just now a white background. And then this section needed to be longer, so I just reversed it and made a left aligned one. Here, I have an icon set, and I just made these sections very similar to one another. And so I find that my design process starts getting really fast. And my designer is really the one who taught me all this. He just kept telling me, don't try to redesign every section. Look back and say, hey, what can I utilize in order to create consistency and make things fast for me? And then between pages here, you can see they all have the same opening title section, the same intro section, the COVID section, icons. Then we have this section. We have these extreme right aligned sections, and so on and so forth. My legal pages, all the same structure. My success pages, all the same structure. This is going to really change the game with your design. It takes some time at first to really think through this and try to limit yourself to using repeating elements. But once you do it a few times, your approach to design will change and you'll start doing it this way naturally. And it's just so much easier. Okay, so that's building your wireframe. Now I have it completely done. The client has gone through all the wording and design. They're clicking through like it's a real website and they give us the thumbs up. This is ready to go as it is. So now we step into number 4, launching locally with a blueprint. So I don't know about you, but I used to launch a new site on our server. So the site was live. Now I discouraged search engines from crawling, but they don't necessarily have to follow that. So you've got potentially bots trying to crawl your site while you're developing. And then you've got those friendly hackers out there who are trying to get into your site while you're developing. Instead of doing that, I would suggest that if you're not already, you start building your sites locally. And that just means instead of building them on a live server, you're using your computer as a server and you're building it within the safety of your own machine. It's just like working online, but it's the safety of your own machine. Also, we have an additional part to this, launching with a blueprint. This is a site that you start with every single time, so you don't have to do the same tasks. When I started working at the church, that isn't what I did. I launched every site from scratch and did all the steps. I had a checklist, but I did them all from the very beginning, which meant I would end up spending like the better half of a day just setting up sites. But now I use a blueprint site and I can launch a site and get working within 10 minutes or less. So you're going to spin up sites faster, save yourself time, have a consistent starting point, and you have a safe, secure development environment. So what's not to love about this step? There's a lot of different local development resources out there. My highest recommendation would be Local by Flywheel. This is not a pitch for them. I'm not an affiliate of them, but we, with our business, utilize Flywheel hosting. I would recommend them to anybody, especially if you're looking to get into the reselling game, which we are stepping into more. They just offer so many great features. The price is right. Their support is second to none. Like, you get somebody in under 5 minutes and they will like really do anything that you need them to do, and they'll do it right. So they're a great host. But they also provide this tool absolutely free, and it's so simple and easy to work with. You set it up in like 2 minutes on your computer. Then you're able to do one-click WordPress installations. You can set up custom development environments for each of those installs. You can even, if you have Flywheel or WP Engine hosting, you can launch a site right from your local machine up to your live server. And I can push the site to my staging environment or to my production environment. I can even pull either of those environments down to my computer, which just makes for a great development environment. And what we're talking about here, they let you make blueprint sites. So a blueprint site is really just a pre-made, ready-to-go template that you have created for yourself. And on my blueprint site, I have all my WordPress settings in their preferred fashion. I've cleaned out all the pages, posts, themes, or anything else that comes pre-baked into WordPress. I set up all of my Divi settings. I set up my child theme. Next class, we'll talk more about child themes and why I highly suggest you use one. I've got all my preferred plugins installed, all my preferred starting pages, and all the custom CSS, PHP, and JavaScript that I want to launch with. I have it all in here. I'll probably talk more about it next time, but for instance, there's some vulnerabilities that exist in WordPress where people can figure out the username of your various users. So I have a number of different code blocks that I include in my blueprint site that fight against those. So every time I spin up a new site, I already know all of them are protected from those attack methods. Okay, so let me give you just a quick view here of local and my blueprint site. All right, so this is local's interface. Here's all the sites that I have on my local machine right now. And you can see boilerplate, that's the name that I give to my blueprint site. And you can pick your web server, your PHP version. Like for them right now, you can even go up to PHP 8 if you want to start testing with that. And you can set your custom domain and trust it on your computer so you're not getting warnings. There's stuff you can do with the database. They even have some like additional add-ons that you can put. They do have a pro version. I'm just using the free version. And here's where I can connect to my host and push sites up or pull sites down. It's pretty simple. Like, that's really it. And then if I want to add a new WordPress site, I just click this plus button. I give it a name, and then I can click, or I can set the domain and say, I want to use my blueprint site. And you can see how I have a date with my blueprint site. I'm constantly updating it. Every time I have a new plugin or a new piece of code that I want to add to my child theme, or a way I want to change the settings for all my sites, I go into my blueprint site, I change it, and I save a new version that I date and I have here for my use when I'm spinning up new sites. But you would just pick that, click create, and in less than a minute, you've got a new WordPress site set up for you, and you can just jump right in and start designing. So no more do you have to worry about getting all your plugins and adding them. You just have it ready to go. So if I had this not started, there'll be a thing here that just says start site. You click that, and then you click W admin here, and it will open up your site right in your browser. So this is my blueprint site, all done locally. So you can see how I have this welcome dashboard just ready to go for my client sites. The styling will change per client, but I've got all the information in here that I need, even our hosting information, and I can just pull things out as I need to. But you can see I keep it up to date, so I have no updates. If I come into Divi, I've got all my settings exactly how I want them. Then what else do I want to put in here? Like themes, you can see I've already got my child theme set up. I just start every one of my sites off with a home page, a contact success, privacy policy. I just get that stuff out of the way so I don't have to do it when I spin up a new site. We'll talk about this shortly, global preset style guide and test page. But you can see I clear out posts. I cleared out all the excess themes. I even put in my own PHP to restructure the links over here because I don't like the way they come out of the box. So I put like the Divi and appearance stuff up top. Then I put all of like my pages and post types together, so on and so forth. I just kind of changed that code myself. And then you can even see with plugins that I've got all the plugins that I like to start a WordPress site off with, some of which I always activate right at the beginning, and some of which I don't based on the client and the project. I'll just delete them. So you can see how this is just going to save you a ton of time. This is all set up that you don't have to do anymore as long as you maintain your blueprint site. And now you're ready to go with building. Okay? So that's our blueprint site. Once I have that spun up, step 5, the first thing that I build in my Divi website is a style guide page. If you follow Elegant Themes blog, which I hope you do, they just put out tons of content. I would have to say they're pretty much the king of content marketing by blogs when it comes to WordPress. You search anything on WordPress, Elegant Themes is coming up first. They're just beasts when it comes to content, and it's all pretty good. Now, one of the things that they've been doing as they put out their theme packs is coming out with these style guide pages. And for a little bit, I was like, whatever. And then I was like, you know what, I'm going to try starting with this. And it's a great way to get yourself focused. Basically, with a style guide page, you're just going to create a reliable styling reference for you on the website that you and your client can use during and after the project. It's going to keep you focused on consistency in your build because you're always going to be able to reliably go back to this place and reference it. It's also a place where you can go back and make your updates to these elements, especially if you're using Divi's presets, which we'll talk more about in next month's meetup. And it's a place your client can go or other contractors can go afterwards to reference colors or other certain design choices. Now, these would be my pro tips with the style guide page. I don't put everything in there. I only include basic style elements like colors and typography and any all-in-one basic modules. So by that, I mean like the toggle module or the button module, or if you want to use a form. If you're creating a section or a row that contains multiple modules in order to make something, that's not what I include in my style guide. I include that in my Divi library. So again, the style guide is just the simplest element. And so I create a style guide page in my blueprint pre-made for myself. So it's already there for me to utilize when I load up a new site. So for Families Matter, here's some examples of items I included in the style guide: color palette, text styles, primary and secondary buttons. And again, I'm utilizing all of this with Divi's new preset feature. So let me go over to my local Families Matter website. And this is, I pulled this down just before we started really putting in all the media. We're like super close to launching this project. We're literally just waiting on the client to share a link with us for donations. But once that is, the site's going to be ready to go. But I'm really proud of what we've created for it. But if I go into pages here and go down to Global Preset Style Guide, I'll click into the back end and I'll go to the front end view for you guys. Thank goodness we're not getting that double load all the time from Divi anymore. I don't know if anybody else still experiences that or has experienced that. So here on the front end, here's what my style guide looks like. It's very simple for them. I have my color palette. Here's my basic text styles, my primary buttons with all of their transitions, my secondary buttons. Then I've got 2 toggle styles that we use throughout the whole site. Then I just basically change my images by putting rounded corners. I want that on all of my images, so that's what I do stock. And then I set up 2 blurbs, a highlight blurb and a person blurb for Jean-Eric Serial. okay? And that's really all that I put into my style guide. And you can see on the back end here, I have everything nicely labeled. So here's my color palette section, okay, and section title and divider. Then I created a square for my background color, and then I have the title for it, and I just copy and repeat that through. Here's my text style, and if I go into here, you can see that I've got my default preset set up, and I could go in there and alter things as I need to. So if I'm building later on the website and I'm like, oh, I want to change this preset, I can change it in that page in Divi, or I could come back here if I want to keep this my central place that I update things that then update throughout the site. And then last thing I'll just show you, here's all of my buttons again. So I've got the actual button, and then I've got the title for it or the label for it. And it just makes it really easy to come back and change this up and add to it as I need. Now, what you'll notice here is I don't have every single individual module. For this client, we built their forms using Jotform, which is a form building. It's not a WordPress form builder. It's an external form builder. I highly recommend them. They just offer so many features if you're looking to build forms for clients. So since I'm not using Divi's built-in form module, I don't create a styling for it. So if you're not using a certain module, don't force yourself to add it here. If later you realize you're going to use an individual model and you could benefit from coming over here and adding it, that's when you can do that. So you're saving yourself some time. Okay, so I got my style guide set up. I have that basic reference. You'd think I'd be ready to go in and start building the pages, but no. Okay, now we're at step 6, building a library of reusable blocks. So before I start putting the pages together, I start with the building blocks and build up my Divi library first. Okay, ultimately, this is going to help you build your pages faster. This whole process is helping you avoid just jumping into Divi and starting to build randomly. It's helping you to spend most of your time preparing, so then all of a sudden at the end, it all just falls into place. Okay, so building these blocks keeps you focused on that goal of consistency. The rest of the project feels easier for you. You can build blocks as you go and utilize smaller blocks to build bigger blocks. And later, if you pass the site off to the client, they can load up these blocks and just change the content. So my pro tips with this would be, this is where your rows and sections are put together. So if you have a section or a row with multiple modules and settings, this is what gets built as a block and saved to your library. Before you build them, look through your wireframe and identify all the blocks that are repeatable that you can build when you get into Divi. And then have a test page on your blueprint site where you can build out all of these blocks. And then even in the future, if you're just messing around, you can have this test page that you can always go back to and play around with things in this secured page that, like if you're using Yoast, you can say, don't index this, don't follow, none of that stuff. So it just stays hidden just for your use. So here you can see in my wireframe, I actually went through and pulled, I'll show you this again. You can see over here, I have repeatable elements. I went through my wireframe and I was like, oh, I use this one all the time, and I pulled it over. I use this all the time, and I pulled it over, so on and so forth. I found all the sections that get reused multiple times, so I knew this is what I had to create. So when I was going into Divi to build the blocks, I just looked at this section here and I was like, this is my standard starting point. So then I identified which of them I was going to save as sections and which of them I was going to save as rows. How do I know which is which? Well, a section to me is one that requires a consistent background, whether I know it's going to be the same color background all the time or pretty much the same image or section height all the time. That's when I'll include it as a section. If, like one of these guys here, it doesn't matter what the background color is, or it can be in different sections, I then save that as a row so that I can just put that into any section that I want. So I went through, identified which of them I was going to save as sections and rows, and then I stepped into my test page and started building. So if I leave that. And here's my test page here that comes with every one of my blueprint sites. And I open this up on the front end, excuse me. Here you can see all the blocks that I built. There's my subpage title section, my intro section, my COVID section, final call to action, success section. Here's my text and image rows, and all of these other elements that I made before making any of my pages. Now, the only reason I could do that is because I took enough time with my wireframe to know exactly how they should be built. And I can go into my wireframe and even measure things for sizing purposes. So then I save all of those to my Divi library. And I have a specific naming scheme that I use. I know that I can set it as a row or a section, but I like to see that. I prefer to see that all the way on the left side, so I know very quickly what's what. So I start all of my sections off with CSN, and then I have a descriptive title, success page message section, subpage final call to action section, or here we have a row, 4-column icon highlight row. And then I can come back here and I can adjust this from the library and adjust my presets all in one spot. And then that gets changed to all of those sections throughout the site. So, I mean, that just fills you with confidence there when you know you have all of these blocks and now you're like, hey, I'm ready to build pages. All I got to do is put the blocks together in the right order, change the content, and I'm golden. So taking the time to do all of this really makes a big difference. So that's creating your reusable blocks. Now, after I've built the blocks, I still don't get into building the pages. I think the very last thing I do before I get into building the pages is I build the header and the footer. Okay. The reason I do this mainly is because I like to build the pages in context with the header and footer. I like to see the pages get sandwiched between those, see how they interact with the header and footer. It keeps me focused on navigation and do these things make sense in the context of the rest of the site. Also, you're going to see if the header and footer are interacting oddly with your pages in any way. If you wait to build them to the end, it would just be kind of frustrating to do that. And all of a sudden, they're just not working with maybe some hero sections that you've built. Also, I feel like it gets the hardest part out of the way first. You know, Divi came out with the theme builder, and I know they like to act like the header and footer building process is awesome, but if you used their old method and then came to this one, you quickly realized, hey, there were some like settings that they made very simple before that aren't as easy here. You know, Renee even reached out to me earlier this week saying, hey, how do I get basically stuff to be where I want it to be in the header by building it with Divi? You know, they really only give you certain column options. If you use Elementor and you like Elementor, awesome. I don't prefer Elementor's interface, but I will say that their ability to easily customize column width is just killing Divi. They need to figure out how to restructure things so that they're either using grid or they're using Flexbox, because not having the ability to set custom column widths easily through the interface is just kind of antiquated. And that's what makes building the header and the footer difficult. If you want, you know, a logo here and a menu here and a button here, and then your socials over here, but you want them to be very specific sizes, the only way that you're going to be able to do that is using custom CSS and Flexbox. So you can see in my pro tip there, something that I recommend you learn how to do is build your headers and footers with one row. Well, let me say it like this. If you're using a row, use a row with one column. Then put all of your modules in stacking and learn how to make that row Flexbox or display flex. So then you can have your items aligned horizontally and you can start to mess with the width more easily rather than having to use their column structures. It just really helps you position things a lot more easily. Where I picked this up is this link right here. If you've ever heard of Divi Life by Tim Streifler, he puts out a lot of good plugins. And they put out this headers layout pack. Now, I personally don't like the designs that they created, but I spent time with the inspector going in and seeing how did they get these things to position the way they do. And they use a lot of Flexbox, and you can just learn from looking at their design how they're getting things to stack and wrap and stay horizontally. Flexbox, now I'm getting into lesson 2, is a big thing I utilize as well to overcome Divi's default breakpoints at 980 pixels, because there's a lot of times where I want things to stay aligned, and using Flexbox, I can make them stay aligned until I'm ready for them to wrap. Okay, so check that resource out and use the inspector and see what they're doing. Another suggestion I would have with the header and footer, I love this phrase. I actually picked this up from a pastor whose name is Craig Groeschel. Clear beats clever. I know that Elegant Themes comes out with these like crazy header designs where they've got like stuff overlapping and pictures in there, and there's all sorts of wild stuff going on, but people just aren't looking for that. The regular everyday user knows what a website navigation should be. It should be a logo, then some links, and then a button, or a logo, centered links, and then a button over here. If you look at your biggest, best performing websites, that's the structure they're going with. They're not going with crazy navigation structures that people just aren't anticipating. Let's say Squarespace or even Shopify. A lot of their templates use these wacky navigation schemes that look cool, but then you start to interact with them and you move your mouse over something and it's like moving the links and you're kind of chasing them around the screen. And it just makes it difficult to get where you want to go as a user. And that's ultimately what you want. So I tend to keep things very straightforward, very simple. It's nicely designed, but it's what the user is expecting, and it performs well on mobile. If I can show you mine for Families Matter. All right, so here's my simple navigation. And you're gonna see that it maintains all the way down. I can't get it smaller right now unless I inspect it, but I even put in my own custom CSS code to make it fill up the whole screen like this. And it's just nice and smooth and reliable and easy to use. You can even see how the contact directions and phone number, I changed the centering of that on mobile, and all of that. I'm not using any desktop versions and cell phone versions. It's all just one version that I've built, and it's simple and reliable. So I get those headers and footers out of the way. They're nice and straightforward. And now at this point, I'm ready to build out the pages. And the method that I take, I just call the development snowball. I don't know if anybody in here has listened to Dave Ramsey, but he's kind of like a financial guru that teaches people how to become financially independent and get out of debt. And one of his big things is called the debt snowball. And you start with small debts and you keep knocking them out of the way until you work to the bigger ones, and it builds up momentum. And that's really the practice that I have taken into my web development. I've taken all this time to plan. I've built out all these blocks. So now what do? I start with the easiest pages first, and that allows me to build momentum as I go. It also keeps me from having to build every single block first. Really, I'm building the majority of them, and then I'm like, this one might be something I have to use, or this one's just a one-time use. I'm not going to worry about that until I hit that portion of the build. So now I feel confident. I feel like I'm progressing, and I love this final benefit here. It gives you consistent touch points with your client. I jump in and on day one, I knock out like 5 super easy pages, right? Like it's just automatic, but the client doesn't know that. But I email them that day and I'm like, hey, Adam, man, I just was excited because I was working on your site today. And I just wanted to let you know I got the privacy policy, terms of service 404 and contact success done. And then they're like, oh man, that's so great. I'm so excited to hear that it's moving. And they're just excited to hear that their project is progressing. And that might actually buy you some time if you need to have a couple more days until you give them a new update. At least they felt like, well, he already got a bunch done, or she already did a bunch with my project. So it's really another wise aspect of approaching it this way. So I start with the pages where I have all the blocks. Then I move on to pages where I only need about one or two. And then I end with the hardest pages. So here's the path that I took with the Families Matter website. I started off with my legal pages and my COVID-19 update page because they're just all text. The only block that I needed for them was this title block at the very top. So I got those out of the way, emailed the client and said, hey, I got all these pages done. They're excited. Then I go to the success pages. I already had these blocks made, so literally all I had to do was just create the page and load up the block and change the content, and those pages were done. Then from there, I moved on to find food, get involved, and donate now. Why? Because I had all of the blocks already created. It was just that those layouts were longer than the other ones, so they were just going to take a little bit more time. Now I move on to the About Us page, which is like basically another big landing page for them. There were two new elements that I hadn't made yet in my library. So I put this page next so I could put in all the blocks I had made and then just focus on building the new elements in relation to all of the ones I had already made. And then I moved on to the contact page that had two new elements as well, but it included my Jot form, and that takes some custom CSS work. Plus I have to set up the confirmation and notification emails and make sure everything's working properly. So that's why that almost goes at the very end. And then finally, I finish most of the time with the home page. It's the most unique page. And this one had the hardest element of the whole build. For anybody that that works with Divi, getting buttons to be in line with one another can be a nightmare unless you now start utilizing Flexbox. And again, one row, one column, and you can use Flexbox to align those. But then you have to deal with all the breakpoints as well. So that's why I save that page for very last. Now you might think, man, the homepage is the most important. Don't you want to start with that? Well, another reason that I don't is because I would hate to start with the homepage and get it tweaked right, and then later find out that I need to change some of my blocks, and now I have to go back to my homepage. So by starting simple and going to difficult, I'm actually able to tweak my blocks to perfection so that by the time I get to the hardest page, the blocks are in their final form, and I just got to put them in place and finish up that homepage, which could have been the most frustrating page, but ends up being pretty easy in the end. Okay, so now I have all of my pages done. It's time to finish up with my launch checklist. So this checklist is just going to help you avoid those little tiny mistakes that could undo all of your work. You know, forgetting to click that let robots crawl or prevent robots from crawling, that could be a big issue. Forgetting to submit your sitemap to Google could be a big issue. I'll never forget the day I was sitting in a friend's driveway listening to, I think it was Divi Life podcast, and they started talking about having to submit your sitemap to Google. And this was early on, and I was like, wait, what? I was like, I have to do what now? I thought Yoast just, that's all I needed to do. And I totally missed that and had to go back and do that on all of my projects. You know, I didn't know about that, but now I do, and I have it as part of my checklist so I don't miss it. And this just creates a repeatable process. You don't have to memorize it. You don't feel stressed out at the end. Instead, it's just like you're coming in for a landing at this point. And when they're all checked off, you know you're done. Just remember pro tips here. It's not set in stone. You're constantly changing it. Your checklist is going to be greatly different from mine depending on the tools and software that you're using. But be sure to include review time at the very end for yourself to just look over your process and see where you can make improvements. So I'm not going to give you everything, but here's just like an example of some stuff you might be thinking about. You know, at the end of the project, content-wise, have you replaced all of your placeholder text? Check for spelling and grammar. replaced all your placeholder images? Did you delete everything out of your media library that was like testing stuff and you don't need anymore to not bloat your database? Are all the videos and links and downloadable files working correctly? Test that stuff, because you're going to come across moments where you missed something and you're going to be so thankful that you did. Check your site in multiple browsers. Test for responsiveness down to the device width that maybe you tell your client is your limit. Like, I don't know if you're still designing for iPhone 4 or if you're designing for, I dare say it, Internet Explorer, okay? Make sure it's working in all those different locations. Do you have your favicon or favicon, however you prefer to say it? Are all your forms working correctly? So on and so forth, okay? SEO wise, if you're using Yoast or something else, depending on when you like to turn that plugin on, get it set up, put all your metadata in, make sure all your images have alt text, and all of your links have title text and proper targets and rel attributes, so on and so forth. Then, if you're working with a client, have your review process set up. We usually offer 2 or 3 rounds of reviews, and we let them know about that from the very beginning and through the whole process. Hey client, this is your first round of feedback. You tell me this, then I do this. Hey, it's your second round. And now, hey, this is your third round of feedback. After this, any additional feedback you know is going to be at our hourly rate, so that they're just prepared and you're not hiding that and it's not a surprise for them. I know there's a lot of people that are just like, unlimited feedback or unlimited rounds of revision. It just doesn't work well for us. It forces the client to really pay attention. And then you get final approval. They pay their hosting agreement if your maintenance package is included, and any other final review steps you would have. Now, again, the rest of it's fuzzy. It depends on who your host is and what plugins they allow or what they require you to do or what features they offer. Depending on your plugins, you may have to do last minute setup for them. Or if you're working with a client or not working with a client. So that's why I can't give you just a full on final checklist, but I did send a WP Engine PDF that they put together of a pretty inclusive launch checklist, because they're going to make one that's better than I can at this point. So you can refer to that. It is a little bit older, but a lot of the stuff really still applies. But no matter what, make sure you're including adding your Facebook pixel and your Google Analytics, and you're submitting your sitemap. Make sure everybody's using secured user accounts. For myself, I use long usernames and I use long passphrases. Like, probably my passphrases are no less than 20 characters, because people will try to brute force you. And utilize 2-factor authentication. There's one that I use, 2Fast Lite, I think it's called. Let me go to my plugins over here. Yeah, this 2Fast Lite Google Authenticator. It's a great free tool. I use Google Authenticator on my phone, and it gives me an additional layer of protection for my sites. And then I get my clients to set that up as well. Have your security and backup plan in place, and make sure you test it. Don't just know that your site can take backups. Make sure you know how to actually take your backup and restore it if something were to happen. And again, click that disable discourage search engine button so that you are now finally ready to launch your website. Okay, so it's been a long road, but you finally launched. You got through all of that project, and hopefully you've had a lot of fun and learned a lot along the way. So stepping back out on a larger scale, here's our workflow from A to B. We created our client questionnaire as our research portion. We use that information to create a sitemap which the client approved, setting the scope for the project. We then used the sitemap to build repeating wireframes so that we got all of our design out of the way. Then we saved time by launching locally with a blueprint site. We knocked down our basic styles. We knocked out our building blocks. We got the header and footer out of the way. Then we followed the development snowball and got the pages all built from easy to hard. We go through our launch checklist, and now the site is live. And I wanted to point out to you, I did the math actually, 7 divided by 9. 78% of this workflow really is planning and preparation. I've heard just too many people recently saying, I just jump right into Divi and I start building. Ultimately, I don't find that that saves me time. It makes the process more frustrating. Call me an over planner, but by the time I'm here, I'm feeling absolutely confident and ready to tackle the site. Okay, so that's the workflow that I follow. And now we have the final section of the meetup tonight, and that is our Q&A session. So Renee, I don't know if you tend to take over here or how we handle things from this point.
Anybody really can talk. If people want to put questions in the chat, you can, or if somebody just wants to unmute themselves on the mic and, you know, just jump in there, you know, however you want to do it, if anybody has any questions.
Cool. Are there any questions that I need to go back through?
I'm sorry, I've been tweeting the meetup. I know you're not on Twitter, but
I see The Last Airbender is my all-time favorite. Whoever said that. Actually, my cat, his name is Iroh. So Airbender fans will know what that is. I think we just finished probably our 20th time going through the series last night, my wife and I. I love it. My son attends Duquesne. I loved going there. I went there for 7 years. Is he now actually showing Adobe XD? So if I
think I said, yeah.
Yeah, if I was showing this, this is XD. So our business utilizes Adobe Creative Cloud. So we're using Illustrator, Premiere, After Effects, Photoshop, and XD. And there's so much you can get into XD. Like, I mean, they're teaching you how to make mobile apps and all sorts of stuff. I'm really utilizing the basic features of XD because you could see I don't have to take this necessarily full featured. I just need something that the client's like, okay, I get how it works and I can see it working.
Did you mention that they click around in it? Is that something that you had?
Yeah, so
they click around in this. So how do you, I guess, what do they see? Like,
yeah,
I assume like if they see what we're seeing right now, that might be a little bit intimidating for them.
You know what? That's funny you mentioned that because I kind of use that sometimes to like help clients, like help your client understand the brevity of what goes into a web project because they're suffering from the Wix and Squarespace effect where it's like, click a button and you've got an amazing designer website in 5 minutes. So I help them understand that there is a lot that goes into having a high quality website. And so here I am in XD and I can either send them a picture of this whole structure and they're like, whoa, but then I come over to prototype and I don't know if it's gonna show it right now. Did we not make I know we made the links. Hold on a sec. Yep, there they are. Okay. Ooh. So what I'm doing in prototyping is I'm actually making page links. And I don't know how I get, oh, okay. So you could see like, these are links just from the home page. I'm trying to remember how I show, there's a way that you can show all the links across the whole site. So sometimes I'll send a client a picture of all of these interconnected links and they're like, holy cow, I'm glad you're handling this for me. And it just kind of, it puts them in your corner, you know? But you actually go through and you say, hey, I want this link right here on tap or on click to take them to the COVID-19 artboard. And you build all of the links around the site. So then you come over to this share button and I name it Families Matter version, whatever. It's for design review. Anyone with this link can see this. So if let me pull up my browser. If I put this link in, the client can go to this. And because in XD, I said that the wireframe has a viewport height of 766 pixels, which is like the most utilized browser height or screen height resolution. that's what it's showing them, and they can scroll through it just like they're looking at the website live on a laptop. And now they're like, oh, about us, I want to read about that. So they click over and it goes to the about us page. And they can scroll through, oh, find food, yeah, I want to do that. They can click over and they just get a feel for how people will see the site and work their way through the site, all the way even down to the footer. Give online. I guess I forgot to link that one. You can see.
I thought that was a link you didn't have yet.
I don't, but oh yeah, that's right. So this button would take them directly to their Give Online, whereas like this donate button takes them to the donate page with more information on it. Thank you, Renee. So it just gives them the ability to be like, hey, is this link supposed to go somewhere? They can leave a comment. They can put a pin and say, hey, right here, you misspelled this word. And we're able to just really get down to the nitty gritty of the site. And that's what I love about this project versus, oh, I built the whole thing in Divi. Well, how are they going to leave you comments? You know, are they going to email you now with an entire list of things? And now you have to go back to the site and look for everything. Not everybody will be as great of a writer as you. And I mean, most of my clients, I swear they're texting me their email replies and they're using text language. So having something like this takes the guesswork out of it.
What did you say this was? You published this? What was the word that you used to get to this point?
Oh, so I design it, then I prototype it.
Prototype it, okay.
Build the links. Oh, there they all are. Then you go to share and you'll generate a link, and then you can just copy that link and send it to your client and they can check it out whenever they want to.
Awesome. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
We have a couple questions about local by Flywheel. If you want to take a look at those, I'm finding the link for it. It's localwp.com is the link for but if you want to tell them a little bit more about it, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's there. Thanks, so Elizabeth.
Localwp.com.
Awesome.
Was there a specific question? Or?
I think it's maybe there's a comparison to MAMP. I said how does it compare to MAMP? I think that it's local is more WordPress friendly. You can use MAMP for any number of things, but local by Flywheel is really specifically for spinning up WordPress sites. So that's one difference. But if you had some other differences or any additional thoughts on it.
I mean, for me, I used MAMP. I swear I used something else after that. And then I found local. And the biggest thing is just, it's not just its ease for WordPress, it's just its ease in general. Like I had somebody first introduce me to building locally and I was like, this is like magic, you know? And he's like, yeah, we just have to install this and do this. And now we open up the command line. And I was like, you know, like I couldn't remember after he showed me how to get into it. With local, you install it, you open it up, and you're just ready to go. You can get as deep and technical with it as you want. Like they have all sorts of stuff with SSH and the command line and everything, or you don't have to get into any of that. Like I'll be the first person to say that I'm not a WordPress developer. I'm not a software engineer. So I'm not using really any of those advanced features, but you could learn it if you want to. It's really just as simple as you load it up. There won't be any sites in here. You click plus, you give it a name, and less than a minute later, you've got a WordPress site installed and you're ready to start building. Something that I love about this especially is like I have this Divi playground that I created. Obviously, you can tell what that is from the site. I'm just going to go in there and mess around with plugins and stuff. So for instance, I got this plugin as part of a Black Friday bundle. It was like a bonus. Thanks for spending this much money. Here's your plugin. And I was all excited to use it. But instead of installing it on one of my live sites, I came over and installed it on my local playground site and quickly realized, man, there's like at least 3 or 4 big bugs with this that make it unusable. And I was able to record my screen, send them stuff, and I can just keep playing around with it there until they have things updated. And whenever you're in a local site like this, you can update your plugins, install themes. You can do everything just like you can on a live site. Something cool is you can mess with all your custom code as well. So for instance, with Families Matter Food Pantry, or I'll go into my blueprint site here, I can right click on it and it comes up with all sorts of, you know, commands and actions that you can take. But if I click reveal in Finder, it's going to open up exactly where that site is on my local computer. And now I can go in, and so you click on the site, you click on app, you click on public, and now here's all of my WordPress files. And if you know, getting into WordPress files and messing with things, if you want to mess with your child theme, you just go to WP content, themes, here's my Divi child theme, and here's my file structure that I have set up for my child theme. And I can open up my style in Sublime Text for those of you that like Sublime Text, and I can go in here and I can make changes code-wise, and that will show up on my local site as well. So that's just a huge benefit. I mean, it's just like I'm working live, it's just on the safety of my own computer, and a lot of times it's usually faster. Don't save. So yeah, that's what I would have to say about local. There's really, unless anybody has a real specific question about it, I know, because I wanted to speak the lingo, if you look up how local works, I believe it works a slightly different way than MAMP and other ones where it's using a virtual machine. And that has something, if you understand that more than I do, it has something to do with the way that it interacts with
it uses Docker.
Okay. Yeah, it was something about them using a virtual machine. And so when you're installing stuff and everything, it's like it's on that virtual machine and it's not messing with the programs and things that are running on your computer or something like that. I apologize if I'm butchering that, but you can find articles that compare them, the different options on a more technical level, but I just really prefer its WordPress focus, its simple user interface, and the fact that I can push it to Flywheel and pull down from Flywheel very easily. Now, if you don't have Flywheel hosting, or you don't have WP Engine hosting, you might be wondering, well, if I build it locally here, then how am I going to take it to my live host if it's somebody else? You can, I know, what is it? WP All-in-One Migration is a plugin that you can use, and I have used multiple times very reliably to make an exact copy of a site, and then you install that plugin on the site installment that you want to take it to. You import that file, and there's your website migrated. The only thing is the free version only lets you move a site up to 300 megabytes. It used to be 500 megabytes. So if you've got a site that's fully developed with a lot of images and things like that, you are going to hit that limit, and then they're going to want you to buy the premium version. But it could be worth it depending on how much you migrate. It makes it super easy, and it's never failed me. So that's WP All-in-One Migration if you want to take it from local and push it to another host.
There's another one out in the market now. Kinsta has one, Dev Kinsta. I'm not sure of their specs, but they're new on the market, I guess, to compete with Local by Flywheel as well. So just another similar thing. There was a question about, where was it at? Whether local, any way to collaborate with teammates in local. I don't think so, right? It's pretty much just standalone on your machine, right? You're not doing any collaborating with teammates?
Yeah, from what I know, like you have these add-ons and they have nothing related to Teams here. If I were to go into my boilerplate site, utilities, tools, they have something called live links. And so this is a pretty neat feature where you could actually have this site turned on your site and send your client a link, and it creates a tunnel where they can see this local version of your site. Now, they had this for free originally, and it worked okay on Chrome, but it didn't work great on Safari. And now they've been adding pro features, and now live links is a pro feature, and they were supposed to change it in a way that was more reliable. I haven't messed with that as much. Part of my workflow is what's helpful when we have a client who decides to be a maintenance client with us is when their site is almost ready for launch, I will actually push it to our Flywheel server with a temporary domain and have it be password protected. And I'll finish the development last minute touches there and then do a review meeting with them where they can see it online. And then once it's all approved, I point their actual domain, unpassword protect it, send them their invoice, all that stuff. They also offer instant reload and a link checker. If you want the pro version, I think it's only like $20 a month. But check out the Teams thing. I can't remember, but I thought they said something about Teams in the pro version. So it's just definitely worth it to play around with and check it out. I mean, I think the best measuring stick is that when you're using a tool and you forget that the tool is there, that's how simple and reliable it is. You'll open this up, launch your site, and you'll minimize this and you're just off developing. That is a good indicator for me that it's a friendly tool.
There was a question about Mike saw your dashboard where you have a note about support tickets, and he wanted to know what platform you use for your support tickets.
Okay. First off, thanks for the question. What you're seeing here is I'm utilizing a plugin from Divi Life called Divi Dashboard, and it allows you to make a layout and drop it in here on the dashboard welcome page. And so a client can access this and they can click access our web request form. So if they do that, it's just going to take them to a form that I have on a special page on our website, and they could fill out this form. And it's actually going to immediately create an Asana task for our company in a specific Asana project, and then we'll get notified, and then we can move that task through our process. So we're not using a ticketing service or software by, like that specifically. We're utilizing, I mentioned it before, JotForm. Let me just put this. Let me go back to everyone. JotForm. So my business partner and I discovered JotForm just a few months ago because they were having some type of a special. And this is just an absolutely feature-rich form builder. If you know custom CSS, you can fully customize all of your forms. So if I come over to the Families Matter, it's just a very simple contact form, but you can see here the form that I embedded onto this page, I made with JotForm and styled in JotForm using their CSS. And it's completely responsive. Now there's some customized responsiveness that I put into it as well, just to like really tweak it nicely. But you just have all sorts of different fields you can put in. You can create all sorts of notification emails and confirmation emails, set up logic very easily and send different emails to different people depending on how people fill out the forms. And it has tons of built-in integrations. Like if you use Asana, you can make a form and attach it to an Asana project in like 30 seconds. It's just so like one touch easy. It integrates with Google Sheets and Google Docs, and it's just got so many options. And a really cool feature that they just came out with was they released a new tables view where you have your form and then you're able to go to a very nice Excel type interface where you can look at all the submissions from the form, and there's all sorts of additional like organization and customization you can do to the back end. So I actually have another JotForm that I set up that I utilize every time I go in and do monthly maintenance for a client's website. And I've set up all my questions. So as soon as I pick which hosting level that client is at, it changes the questions to be specific to their hosting package. I fill that out, it goes into the data table, and then I can go into the data table and I can say, chunk together all the people that are on our basic hosting plan, chunk everybody together that's on our premium hosting plan, and I can just have a whole record, print all that out for a client and send it to them if they request it. So it's really like a super inclusive tool for forms, and you can just embed it, send people to the external version of it. I would definitely recommend it. I prefer using an external builder like that rather than a WordPress plugin based form, because I don't want any form information filling up the database. I'm sorry, I keep looking over here because that's where I have all of you guys positioned. I don't want any of that information filling up the database, and I want to have the ability to know I can go back and get all that form data. So I like that it's external to the site.
Two questions about that. So does it help with the email deliverability then? So do they handle all the deliverability and then you don't have WordPresses, you know, fiddling with that SendGrid or Mailgun or SMTP or anything?
Yeah,
Is
from
that a
what
benefit
I know, I mean, you're embedding their form and it's sending through
there?
through their servers, all the data and everything is on there.
And then do you have the client then sign up for their own account and then you get their login and do everything with theirs?
No, what we're doing right now is we purchased one level with JotForm, and we predetermined, hey, you know what? We can get clients to pay for forms on this, and we can add that as an add-on to their package.
Okay.
So as we're going into the web build and we're talking to them about hosting, then you say, hey, and you know what? If you want advanced forms on your website, and that means X, Y, and Z, that's $10 a month. And we'll build the forms, maintain the confirmation and notification emails. We'll house all the data. If you need any changes or whatever as part of your hosting package, you get this much time a month, you reach out to us and we can change your forms up. The nice thing is that we can just integrate and send emails to different clients without necessarily having to have them make user accounts. Now, when we go up to another level, we'll be able to utilize user accounts, but right now this is how we're using it. But the cool thing is, whenever I send them notification emails, I can include a link to the data table that houses all of the data's form. So they never have to reach out to me to say, hey, can you look back and give me the information for Dave Smith who contacted us sometime in November? They can click the data table link that I've created and only allowed them to view, and they can go view and download the data from the form all on their own without having to ask me.
So how would you disconnect them? Like, let's say they want to change hosts or they want to change people. You know, hosting is one thing. Okay, you can help them migrate the site or they can pay you to migrate the site. How would they disconnect from that?
Well, something we probably haven't completely thought through. But at that point, it's even like with Divi, we kind of talk to people about, hey, if you're hosting with us, you're going to utilize our Divi license. If you're going to be leaving, then you'll have to get your own license. And when you replace it, you'll still be able to utilize this theme and the changes that we've made. As for something like JotForm, they'd be able to get their own license, and then we can download the data, send it to them,
migrate, okay,
duplicate forms, and have them set up with that. Or I don't know if we have to cross the bridge of trying to like make new versions of the forms using Divi or just kind of setting them up, but that would probably, that's something we'll have to deal with, but probably something where, hey, they set up on this, we're going to need to recreate these forms or duplicate them so that they can have them in their own license. But some of that is too thinking about the client and when it's appropriate. Like for those clients of ours that just need contacts forms and things that are simpler, it's like a great option. But then we had a client who was a physical therapist and they needed HIPAA level forms. And we were just like, you know what? you are probably right, just getting your own license of this. And then because we know Jotform, we were able to educate them on how to do that, and could even work into the project. Hey, if you want us to customize these forms, we can add that into the project because we know how to work with it. So now it's something that we suggest to people as well.
Right. There was a question about what about using the Divi theme builder with dynamic content as another Divi tool set to enhance predictable, repeatable, and connected dev steps? Will that be covered in part 2?
I would have to be honest and say that that's something I haven't done that much of, but we are stepping into a new project with this pharmaceutical company where I'm like, okay, I need to challenge myself to actually start to use templates and use dynamic content, like utilizing
The page title.
What's that?
Like the page title or something.
Yeah, and custom fields.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I'm going to challenge myself to use on this next project. And that's really the name of the game with each project is, hey, what's one new thing I can try and do? I feel very confident in my ability to make the header and footer now, to make things stack or not stack when I want them to. You know, I've got these processes set up. So now I know my next thing is I've got to start really learning how to use custom fields, custom post types, and how to use that dynamic content. And some of it up to this point has just been the projects that we've worked on have been more static and not needed that as much. But, you know, with this pharmacy company, one of the things that they're going to have is a number of legal pages. So I'm like, okay, I can figure out how to make a custom post type for that and make a template that they're using. They're going to have a number of employment positions. I'm like, okay, that's something that I can utilize as well. And then also create like a overview page where I can load in those posts and people can click into it from there. So that's definitely my next level that I'm going to be stepping into. Though I've paid attention to how they use the dynamic content and I can see where it comes in handy. That's what I need to get into next.
So maybe later in 2021,
oh, man.
Once you figured it out, if you wanted to do another meetup.
Or there's somebody out there in this meetup who knows me.
Yeah, the dynamic stuff I think is super important. And you're right, totally right. Like custom post type, you know, archive, single, you know, these are all skinned the same way. I would think would be super valuable.
Yeah, and you know, they mentioned the repeatable and the consistent, like that would definitely be the icing on the cake there to like really utilize that as well. Yeah, sometimes I think it's just like, where does it apply? Like if it's a blog post, pretty much all of your blog posts end up looking the same. Or like I said, for this pharmacy company, all of the employment pages or the legal pages are pretty much going to have the same structure. When I'm doing a home page and a contact page and about page, those aren't necessarily going to have all the exact same structure. And that's been the majority of what we're building. A lot of the clients that we've stepped into with our first year are really like, there's a lot of clients out there who aren't online or they have a really bad website. And so a lot of them at this point can just afford getting a website online that is designed well and has a really good base. And now we have a point through the rest of this year and beyond to keep stepping them into, hey, why don't we start adding this to the site? Why don't we add a blog to the site? I know in another project I'm stepping into with a church, it's going to be the first time I'm really, really sinking my teeth into the events calendar. By Modern Tribe and figuring out how I get that to work for them. So yeah, I'm definitely learning out there just like everybody else. Renee, you're making me nervous.
I don't know. It's fine. If you're just doing basic stuff, it's fine. Sometimes you get into the weeds with that. And I don't know. It's not my favorite thing.
Yeah.
Other things I like, but you know. Anyway, any last questions? I had put a few things in the chat. People wanted to know about the recording. That'll be up. It's going to take a little while for this to download to my computer and then for me to upload it to YouTube. But if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll get a notification when that comes out. Like I said, either later tonight or tomorrow. Also, the link that I had sent that includes the slides and all the resources will also have the video embedded. And the last link was the link to the next meetup. I just sent the announcement. So if you are part of the group, which you probably are because you RSVP'd, you'll get an email about the next meetup, which is just in a few weeks. So all of that should be in the chat.
Yeah, I think I looked back through the chat. I really appreciate the nice comments that everybody put in. I told Renee heading into this, I'm like, I'm nervous that people are going to be like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or like it's really, really basic. So there's a lot of nice comments in here from you guys, and I appreciate that. That makes me smile a lot for sure.
Yeah, I think it was great. You know, just seeing like a process, and you know, I think we all need to get a little bit better at, you know, making this a reusable, repeatable, you know, consistent sort of process instead of just kind of like, I don't know, haphazard, you know, as it starts when you're first starting, or, you know, sometimes you let the projects kind of get out of control. And this is it's inspiring.
Yeah, and I think that really comes into it too with design. It's like you can get so focused on, I need to create the most exciting design out there, and these people are doing this, and my project's not going to be great if it doesn't look as good or better than that. But it's also the process too. Do your clients like working with you? Do you keep them informed? Is the process smooth and ongoing? And you know, it's all about finding the line where it helps you reach the goals and being okay with, I don't need to go beyond that right now until I have to. And you know, I'm blessed enough to have a business partner who's a great photographer and a great designer. I mean, just killer stuff. So when I make this basic stuff, he's able to go in and then really kind of add the razzle dazzle. But if you've got a good color scheme, consistent topography, and enough white space, it's just nice and clean and a nice breath of fresh air. And again, if you check out really major websites, they're very simple. Like you break it down and you're like, okay, it's a title and some text and an image here. Okay, then it's a centered title and some text and a link. And it's like, don't feel like you have to shoot for the stars unless it's like some really creative person that you're building a site for that just has to have it express their like true creativity. So, and then take, like we just talked about, okay, my next project, what's the next thing that I do? Something I would like to try to do, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but like way back in the day when Divi 3.0 was coming out, they had their Divi 100 series, and they released a bunch of content over 100 days. And one of them was a little plugin that they made that animated the hamburger icon. So you could hover over it and it would like move. And when you clicked on it, it just added a nice bit of polish, but that plugin doesn't really work anymore. I did find an article where somebody was showing how they animated this using CSS, not with Divi specifically, but just in general. That'd be something I'd like to challenge myself to learn as well, how to animate this hamburger menu that just adds a little bit of flair to the mobile menu. So if anybody knows anything about that, that'd be something cool.
Yeah, very neat.
Cool.
Okay, it's 8:54. I don't know about you guys, but I'm tired. And I know you want this video, so I'm gonna put this video up. I'm gonna try to get loaded. Yeah, and you have other work to do, so it's late. So again, don't forget to sign up for the next meetup. Visit us at wppittsburgh.com. Do all that good stuff. Oh yeah, some LinkedIn too here in the chat. So yeah, and hopefully we'll see you next time in a couple weeks. So thank you so much, Mark. We appreciate all your time, and we'll hopefully see everybody soon.
Yeah, see you guys.
Yay, take care.